Okay, warm up number one.
Great.
What is your favorite place to eat in Los Angeles?
You know, I'm a state senator and I represent about 1 million Angelinos, and there are probably about 2 million restaurants in the district. You're not going to get me in trouble talking about my favorite
Oh, we're
restaurant.
not going to put it anywhere.
Yes, I'm still not
Okay,
going to tell
how
you.
about like a
I knew Coro was special. I had a number of aha experiences with Coro. I think selection day, when I walked out of that room devastated and sobbed in the parking lot and didn't know where I'd parked my car. I knew Coro was special in the middle of my Coro experience in terms of the places I found myself, the incredible people I had the opportunity to do informational interviews with. And I've continued to understand the significance of Coro in my life, post Coro, now 30 years, in terms of the times I reflect back on my Coro experience or I reach into my Coro toolkit to come up with a strategy or an approach to solving a problem. So I've had multiple aha moments with regard to Coro. Well, this weekend, I think, which is Selection Day weekend, at least it is in San Francisco, marks my 30th anniversary for my Selection Day experience myself. And I brought my personal item that I used in Selection Day 30 years ago, which I still have and still has significance in my life. But the reason I selected it and what it reflected for me was the person who gave it to me and the life experiences I had. I shared with her in going through the Boys and Girls Betty Crocker's cookbook in cooking items throughout my adolescence. Good friend of my mother's, who was a social worker with her in South LA, who was white, Judy Jones, retired family court commissioner. And Judy would pick me up. Judy didn't have kids, and we would cook together. And this reflected for me bridge building, getting to know people from cultures and a different walk of life from yourself, and how you could come together around a common task and develop relationship. And so that's probably close to what I said 30 years ago, but this is definitely was my personal item I brought to Selection Day. I think really just my approach to problem solving, not only as a legislator, but as a nonprofit executive. Coro taught you that time is not always on your side. You're given a series of facts and you have to make a decision. You may not have the luxury of having all of the information laid out neatly and conveniently, but you have to trust your gut and have a core set of tools to pull from to identify a problem, assess your landscape, figure out who the key players are in a city, a town, a company, and how to solve the problem. And so that experience, that experiential learning, the training I got from Coro really helped me hone my problem solving skills. And as a legislator, challenged by budgets and legislation and the pace at which we work in the California legislature, I tap into my Coro toolkit regularly. And some, the reality is some of them are life-changing. As a budget committee member, I've had the opportunity to vote on budget proposals that I think, and I'm clear, have life-changing consequences on Californians, both positively and negatively. My Coro year, one of our group projects, we were assessing the number of kids living in Skid Row. And it was a group project. Steve Sugarman, a couple others. Sugarman and I are friends today. We're on this project together, and we developed a survey instrument, went door to door and toured the largest SRO hotels in Skid Row, the Alexandria and the Roslyn. I remember the newborn baby that had just come home from Big County, come home to a SRO hotel. I remember the kids playing in the dark corridor. I remember just coming to grips, probably for the first time in my young 21-year-old life, around poverty and deep poverty and the impact it has on families. And those are memories and feelings and experiences and sights and smells that I bring to my job today when I am carrying legislation and acknowledging the fact that we still have far too many children in California who live in deep poverty. I think that group project where we came up with this concept for a FamTel, where we wanted to have temporary supportive housing for families with support services right there, is a model that we see, a variation of today all over the country in terms of trying to support the chronically homeless population. And so that's one of my fondest Coro memories. I have to thank our Dean of Students at UC Riverside, who willingly wrote my letter of recommendation to Coro. I think he was anxious to get me off campus because I was a student organizer and a bit of a rebel rouser. Kathleen Staunton, our training director, who pushed me and challenged me, probably in ways that I'd never been challenged before, quite frankly. And told me some truths about myself, probably the first time anyone had ever really confronted me that way. And so I owe her a debt of thanks, quite frankly. My fellow Corons, some of whom I still have a relationship today, people I met, experiences I had, learning how to conduct an informational interview, learning how to think critically, listen, and ask questions. Not questions to make you sound smart, but questions to really get to kind of the root of a problem. Those are the people and experiences and skills that I value and honed through my Coro experience. The vision around, I felt, that Don Fletcher and the others had around establishing Coro was their love for Los Angeles, their love for civic engagement, and their desire to see a trained group of civically engaged people who could be problem solvers in a community, wherever that community ultimately is. Leaders who could work together, a group of 12, to create solutions that impact all of us in our daily lives. Much like leadership, sometimes you know it when you see it, even though it's difficult to describe. Coro, I think, is a lot like that. But when people talk to me about Coro, the first thing I say is, other than my first year serving in the California legislature, it was my 1 year of the most intense personal growth and development. I could feel myself broadening and expanding and deepening my soul searching and my critical thinking. And so it was a huge growth year for me. And two, it gives you the practical experience about how to grow into a leader. It's not theory, well, it is theory, but it's also practice. And you're given the opportunity to exercise that muscle, that part of you, to figure out if you really can grow into a problem-solving leader. That's what Coro is to me. Well, I appreciate having been an executive in the nonprofit sector. I appreciate the challenge something like Coro, the enigma, as you suggested, is in terms of keeping it up and viable and running and effective. And so I think making sure that Coro continues to do Coro, that it continues to be funded, that it continues to be engaged, it continues to attract, quite frankly, the best and the brightest from the region and beyond into and integrated into their valuable programs. And so while I'm sure there are some visionaries out there at your dinner as we speak who are looking for the next iteration for Coro, what I want for Coro is solid funding and support so Coro can continue to do what it has done for the past 60 some odd years in a meaningful, substantive way. Coro is really funny. As I said, I did the calculation about, it was 30 years. I've had the pleasure of working collaboratively with fellow Corons. When I was CEO at Crystal Stairs, my chief program officer, Javier Lafianza, was a Coro fellow. I've hosted Coro fellows, both at Crystal Stairs. Had the opportunity when I was a first-time candidate in 2010 to have a Coro fellow assigned to me for his his campaign experience. And the funny thing is, anytime I talk to somebody about Coro, I come alive. I get more animated than I typically am, telling them about selection day and my favorite assignments. And without a doubt, with no question, the person always says to me, "What year were you a fellow?" Because I think they think it must have been very recent history the way I talk about it. And it was the young man who was the fellow during my campaign, who I took him to lunch after the campaign because I wanted to hear his experience about Coro. I wanted to tell him mine. And it felt for the first time for me that I had crossed over and become an elder, because I could see him very patiently listening to my stories as I was animated, telling him about my Coro experience. And finally, very patiently, at one point he said, "And what year were you a fellow?" And I looked at him and I asked him what year he was born, and I realized it was before he was born. But I always continue to support Coro. I'm thrilled to be able to host fellows and support projects because I believe I experienced what Coro can do in terms of impacting the trajectory of one's own professional advancement and just really you finding your own leadership chops, figuring out your place in a society, in a civil society, and what role you're going to play in advancing it. I attribute a lot of the issues I focus on and the way in which I approach my work as a state senator to my Coro training, and I'll be forever grateful. 1986 was how many years ago? This is 2016?
30.
That's 30 even.
30 years ago.
I was a Coro fellow 30 years ago, Charles.
Oh, we got that on tape. That's good. All right.